With the help of Hashem, we are starting a new Masechta, Masechtas Moed Katan, Moed Katan Daf Beis. I would just like to mention that in the previous cycle, in 2014, it was during what was called the Gaza War. It was we left Los Angeles, a group from Chabad Sola, to visit the Jewish communities, especially around the Gaza border. It was the week after Tisha B'Av, or approximately then. So just to give Yasher Koyach, I remember Eran Weiss and Omri Cohen and my daughter. We were sitting in Ashkelon, and we began this Masechta Mamash during the middle of the class. We needed to run into a protective room. That was a interesting memory. So Chevra, Moed Katan deals primarily with two topics. Firstly, with the dinim of Chol HaMoyed. So we have the Yom Tov of Pesach and the Yom Tov of Sukkot. That is biblically a 7-day Yom Tov, but it's not that there are 7 days in which one may not work, or Chutz La'aretz, it's an 8-day Yom Tov. Adding Simchas Torah, a 9-day Yom Tov. But we have the intermediate days that is a mixture of Choil and Moyed. Weekday, Moyed normally means Yom Tov. When you read the word Moyed here, in Moed Katan, it doesn't mean a real Yom Tov, it means Chol HaMoyed. Now, Chol HaMoyed, many people don't appreciate enough of how much Yom Tov is Chol HaMoed. It's Yom Tov. And actually, there are many types of labors of melacha that one may not do. However, as we will be learning, there's going to be primarily 5 different heterim which will allow us to do something which otherwise, without the heter, would have been prohibited. Now, before we go through the 5 heterim, another very interesting point. There's really a 4-way machlokes rishonim how to view the prohibitions, the isur melacha, on Chol HaMoed. Midoraisa, and actually throughout Chazal we'll find verses that allude to it. Midrabanan, meaning all of the psukim from where we'll learn that you really may not do anything you want to do is only a asmachta. There was this concept of midoraisa, but God didn't define exactly what you can do, and Hashem gave it over to the Chachamim to define what melacha may not, and therefore what melacha may be done. I'll give you an example for that. Hashem says that we have to afflict ourselves on Yom Kippur. Inui on Yom Kippur is doiraisa. But exactly how should we afflict ourselves, other than not eating and drinking? The other inuyim were not defined by Hashem. The Chachamim defined, you can't bathe, you can't anoint yourself, etc. When they gave those definitions, is that a doiraisa or is that a derabanan? It's really not this nor that. It's a doiraisa, but Hashem gave it over to the Jewish people to determine what inui means. So there's such an approach also in Chol HaMoed. There's the general prohibition of working, but Hashem gave it over to the Chachamim to define. And then you have a 4th opinion which hold that certain prohibitions are biblical and certain prohibitions are rabbinic. This is just a good quick intro, because at times we'll see that whenever there is a doubt whether something is permitted or prohibited, we err on the side of caution. We're machmir. That's normally only done if the isur is doiraisa. Other times in other dinim, whenever there's a suffix, could I do this on Chol HaMoed, could I not do it on Chol HaMoed? We're going to be lenient, which is generally the way we approach isurei derabanan, suffix derabanan l'kula. So just bear in mind that there's really a complexity of opinions of how severe, how high, how chamur is the isur melacha. Now let me share the words of the 5 heterim, and as we will learn the Masechta, we will unpackage every single one. So we're going to have the concept that we will learn today called davar ha'aved. Something will be lost. If I won't work, then I'm going to lose something. That is a reason to be lenient, which will allow us to do that work. There's another heter called oichel nefesh. If it's related to food for consumption. Chevra, let's not forget that even on a bona fide Yom Tov day, oichel nefesh, I can cook on Yom Tov, certainly on Chol HaMoed. Number 3 is when you have a person, poyel, she'ein loy ma yoichel, a worker who doesn't have what to eat. We're going to be lenient for him to do certain types of work. Then there is the concept of tzorchei moyed. You are working for festival needs, for Yom Tov needs. And the 5th is called tzorchei rabim, communal needs. These are the 5 heterim. Now, let me give you the other side of the coin. There's going to be really factors, 4 major factors which will make something forbidden to be done on Chol HaMoed. Number 1, it's called Mechaven Melachtoi L'Moed, which means that if you scheduled your work dafka for Chol HaMoed, you could have done it before, you could have done it afterwards, but you thought, you know what, since Chol HaMoed, I'm going to do it on Chol HaMoed. That makes it worse. Number 2 is something called Tircha Yeseira. Tircha Yeseira in English means excessive exertion. How do you define that? Very difficult. When does something become excessive? And a little bit less, it won't be excessive. Good. The Chazal normally did not put a finger on that, but let's get familiar with the terms. Tircha Yeseira. Something called Derech Schirus, which means if you are working for hired pay, you're getting paid for the day. And number 4, also these are reasons to prohibit, is if the work is being done bifarhesia, in public. Now we're going to put all this together. Our Mishnah will begin by pointing out the following. There's going to be 2 dinim in our Mishnah. Number 1, we're going to define Davar Ha'aved. Davar Ha'aved, you're going to lose money, is a reason why you would be allowed to do work. Our Mishnah will give us a scenario where we get clarity that there are 2 different types of laws. One permits us to work and one does not. And that is like this: if I won't work, if I'm not going to work, I'm going to lose profit. Our Tana holds that the loss of profit is not called Davar Ha'aved, even though I'll lose. Davar Ha'aved only means if I'm going to lose principal. Something that I already own will become devalued. That's called Davar Ha'aved. That's very important. Number 2, second din that we will learn from our Mishnah, that even when you have a heter of Davar Ha'aved, if the only way to prevent losing money is by doing work that Chazal determine is called Tircha Yeseira, it's excessive work. If it's excessive work, even though it's Davar Ha'aved, you may not do it on Chol HaMoed. And the example of that will be given in the Mishnah. These will be basically the 2 dinim in the Mishnah. We're going to have the Mishnah will go on and tell us that if it is Tzorchei Rabim, if what you're doing is for the community, then you are allowed to do it, even if it is Tircha Yeseira. Okay, that takes care of that. And before I give another kitzur of Daf Beis, just to make it clear that even though the beginning Parakim, it's a small Masechta, begins with the Isurim of Chol HaMoed, but the Masechta also deals with laws of mourning, of Avelus. Many people do not learn Moed Katan because they don't want to learn Dinei Avelus. There are actually some, the Sefer Chasidim calls that learning Moed Katan is like getting involved with a Meis Mitzvah. You're doing a mitzvah, you're learning something that most people don't learn, which is a big mitzvah. And furthermore, perhaps that kol haloime toiras chatos ki'ilu hikriv chatos, let's say that whoever learns the dinam of Avelus will be yoitze with any type of mourning simply by the learning, and no one, God forbid, will have to experience an actual moment of Avelus. Now, throughout the Tir and Daf, not only will we basically introduce the dinim that we mentioned of Davar Ha'aved versus Tircha Yeseira, Tzorchei Rabim, but we will also learn in Daf Beis Amud Beis some Hilchas Shabbos. We're going to learn some Hilchas Hasra'ah. Before, if there's someone to be punished in a Beis Din, in a human court, prior to their violation, they needed to be forewarned that you may not do what you are about to do. Now, some of those details will be reviewed on Daf Beis Amud Beis. We will also begin to touch a little bit on some laws of Shemitah, Hashgacha Pratis. We're learning this in the month of Shvat, Tavshin Pei Beis. This is a year of Shemitah. And if we'll have time, we're going to conclude today's daf by the following. In Shabbos, there's something called Avos and Toldos. So you have the 39 primary prohibitions, and then you have many other activities that are derivatives of, or they are children of, those 39 primary prohibitions. The Av and the Tulda are both equally prohibited biblically. What we will learn, whether we'll get to it today or whether we'll begin with that tomorrow when the whole Daf Gimel will be about Shemitah, is that by Shemitah, Toldois are bechlal not on the same category of avos, to the point that it's possible that an av will be prohibited and its derivative will be permitted, as we'll give examples as we unpackage this daf. So without any further ado, Chavra Freilach, Moed Katan, Daf Beis, Amud Aleph, here on top of the Amud. Starting with the Mishnah. The case that the Mishnah uses to introduce this idea again of Davar Ha'aved, right? There's something that will be lost, which is why you can work, but not to prevent profit. If you're only going to lose profit, that's not called a loss, only the principal. Tircha Yisera, even if you're going to lose the principal, you may not do work, is when a person has a field. There are two types of fields that are mentioned in Chazal. One is called Beis Habal. Beis Habal means a field in which its produce can grow only by rainwater. Beis Hashalchen refers to any type of field. Generally, these were the fields that were more on mountains or hills, not in a valley, so the rainwater would roll off it. It needs to be constantly irrigated for things to properly grow. Now, when you have a Beis Hashalchen, and you b'chlal never watered it even once, it didn't even rain even once, that's not the case of the Mishnah, because then watering it on Chol HaMoed will only mean that things will begin to grow earlier. If you're not going to water it on Chol HaMoed, nothing will be lost. But you'll lose getting profit quicker. That's never a heter to work on Chol HaMoed. But if you have such a field that needs human irrigation, it was already watered before Yom Tov, which means that which planted, the seeds that were planted already began to sprout. Now, if it won't be irrigated, that might get ruined. Something is already beginning to develop, and it needs your watering the field. Verstehst? Now, watering is a classic example. That's a malacha that on Shabbos we may not water our fields to make it grow. Right? It's part of it. It's like it's a tulda of your zoireya. You're promoting growth. Here, things already began to grow. So says the Mishnah, Mashkin Beis Hashalchen b'moed. You are allowed to water. Beis Hashalchen means a field that needs human irrigation, our irrigation. Moed throughout this Masechta doesn't mean Yom Tov, it means Chol HaMoed. Why not? So it's amazing. So the premise is, don't think you can work Azay and Chol HaMoed. We're beginning that Chol HaMoed should be like Yom Tov. But we're looking for a heter. This is a good heter. This is the heter called Davar Ha'aved. Din number 2. Now, even though this Masechta is about Chol HaMoed, we're going to also mention Shemitah. You are allowed to irrigate a field on the Shemitah year. And we're going to deal with this again, mainly on Daf Gimel, and we'll begin the sugya on Daf Beis Amud Beis. Now this obviously has to be clarified, because people think, one second, on Shemitah you can't work the land. And does this not include a problem of making things grow? We'll get to that today, or if not today, in the beginning of tomorrow. So let's just shelve the Shemitah and deal with it soon. Back. Now another nuance. Here's the nuance, guys. Here's the word. That's the whole daf today. Davar Ha'aved. The case of the Mishnah, again, the case of the Mishnah is that you already planted things before Yom Tov. That's key. Things began to grow. If you will not water it on Chol HaMoed, that will get ruined. You're going to lose money. You're going to lose something that you already have. You can work. If the work demands excessive exertion, you no longer have the heter. So now the Mishnah, I'll say it by heart. Where do you get the water from? Today you just turn on the tap. They didn't have that. Getting water sometimes demanded excessive exertion. Now, some fields were near a spring. It's easy to direct spring water to your product. New springs means that the exit from the ground just came out. It's not here for a long time. And people would build like little canals, or they would build walls to direct the water. To a certain percent, when you had a new spring, its walls would collapse because it's that new. It's not properly broken in. To fix such a canal, that type of work is called Tircha Yisera, excessive. Now, you're not fixing anything, it's working. But one might have thought, if I'm using water from a source that might need a lot of work, maybe Chazal will tell me don't even go there. They did not say that. If right now it's working, even if you have a spring, right? That's what we call a new spring. So the walls are not yet sturdy. And Taka, if it will collapse, of course, if you would ask a Shaila, the Rav will say, don't fix it. No debate about that. But we are afraid sometimes you're not going to ask questions. It's only going to collapse a little. You're going to fix it. You're going to end up doing a lot of work. We don't have to be chayish for that. Right now the spring is working, and certainly, Bein mimayin shelo yotza batchila. The Gemara is going to ask, why did we need to have the second line in the Mishnah? Of course, if you can use a spring, even if there's a potential tircha yeseda, but we're not taking that into account, certainly you can water it from a mayon, right? That's already functioning for a long time, where the likelihood of it collapsing is very low. The Gemara will explain. Aval, however, ein mashkin, we may not water a beis hashalchin if the source of water is from gathered rainwater. Getting water from a pool of rainwater means you filled it up in buckets, verstehst, the good old way, and you would be the water schlepper. That's called tircha yeseda. Or they used to gather water from a well. Again, they would schlep it. That's the letter Aleph, according to some opinions, right? The Yid that's carrying, the water carrier. Are you going to lose that which you planted? Yeah. Davar ha'aved doesn't trump tircha yeseda by private property. By tzarchei rabim, it does. By your own, it doesn't. Other details. Ve'ein oisim ugiyois lagafanim. You may not make ditches around the roots of grapevines, which was done in order for rainwater to collect around, because that's also considered excessive exertion. It's the way the Chazal try to paint what's called excessive is that they give many examples, and when you learn all of these examples, then you can put in your mind the way the Chazal understood excessive. One may not dig a new irrigation canal. That's also tircha yeseda. Not on Chol HaMoed, not on Shemitah. However, the Chachamim hold that yes, oisin es ha'ama batchila bashvi'is. Everyone agrees that on Shemitah, watering a Beis HaShalchan is permitted. The question is, do we have this limitation of tircha yeseda, which we have by Chol HaMoed? Do we have it by Shemitah? That's this machlokes tanoim. In other words, the Chachamim hold that there's no issue of tircha yeseda when it comes to the Shemitah year. Either this type of work is prohibited, or this type of work is permitted. And if it's permitted, it doesn't become prohibited because, you are exerting yourself too much. Next then.
Why is it called the
Amma, because a very good question. The width and the depth of these canals was an Amma by an Amma. Yeah. Umesaknin es hamikol kolois b'moyed. If you already have a canal and it's common that dirt begins to clog the pipes, Rab David, people that are familiar in this line of work. So to remove the dirt, making one is called tircha yeseda. Fixing an old one is not called tircha yeseda, and all of this is the key. All of this is because you have a field that you already not only planted in that field, but it began to grow. If you will not continuously water it, that's the nekuda here. That which is there will get ruined. However, in contrast to tzarchei rabim is even a greater heter. Umesaknin eskil kulei hamayim shebereshus harabim. You are allowed to repair any type of water that is used by the public. So you have this public cistern, you have this public, pool, and even if chevre here, the fixing it means excessive work. You can clear them out. You can fix roads, and streets. Mikvahs. The Gemara is going to explain what every single phrase is adding. You can mark graves. Again, we'll leave this for the Gemara. And the final din in the Mishnah is v'yoytzen af al haklayim, that you may go out to inspect the fields for kalayim. We just did learn this at the end of Mesechtes. At the end of Mesechtes, what did we just learn, Chavre? At the end of Mesechtes Megillah, if you remember, when we spoke about we quoted the Mishnah in Shkolim, be'echad ba'adar, right? Not only did the Beis Din announce regarding the Shkolim, that's the whole sugya of reading the parsha. They also would remind people to uproot their kalayim. Now, when the Mishnah is saying that they are allowed to go out for kalayim, like, why would they not be allowed? What malacha are we violating here? So Tosfos understands that actually the last line in the Mishnah is not addressing work that is prohibited or with a heter permitted. No, we're speaking there about Chol Hamoed Pesach, and the Mishnah is telling you another din, that there is a mitzvah on Beis Din during Chol Hamoed Pesach to go and inspect, because like we mentioned, like we just quoted the Mishnah in Shkolim that we learned in Megillah, that no one planted kalayim. We're not speaking about the Rishoyim, but it's possible that in your field other seeds got mixed with your grain, and the owner is obligated. He was told Rosh Chodesh Adar, go check it. And if he would find kalayim, he would uproot it. And at a certain point, Beis Din has a mitzvah to send out shluchim to inspect people's fields and to deal with it appropriately if someone did not uproot their kalayim. Okay, I want to give one more word of introduction, and that is, like we mentioned already a few times, whenever you see that in a Masechta, Tosfos does what Rashi does, which is that Tosfos becomes a simple mefaresh. He's explaining the meaning of the words. He's not saying kasha, it says over there. He's not asking contradictions. That's because certainly Tosfos did not have Rashi. And here again, there are many that opine that what we will call Rashi was not written by Rashi. Again, Vaharaya, Tosfos is Rashi-like. Right, you have that in the Darim. Right, you have the Ran that's in the place of the Tosfos that is like Rashi because it probably was not Rashi, and many other Masechtas. But nevertheless, we don't know who authored it. Many people say they think it's the Rabbeinu Gershom. Whoever, will refer to it to Rashi, but just lav dafka. Probably Rashi was not the one that wrote the commentator that's in the place of Rashi. Okay.
Sorry, these list of things that are here at the end, are those all Chachamim Omrim?
No. The Chachamim Omrim was only a machlokes regarding whether Tircha Yeseda limits that which otherwise would have been permitted on Shemitah. Okay. And again, guys, we're going to leave Shemitah for Daf Gimel, and maybe we'll begin today. Okay, so we learned this is a key. See the examples the Mishnah gave. Davar ha'aved is only if you are losing money. Preventing, not getting profit is not called davar ha'aved. And even when you have the real heter of davar ha'aved, the moment it's tircha yesera to prevent loss, you lost your heter if it's for you. By tzarchei rabim, that's the last cases of the Mishnah. We don't care about tircha yesera. So now we want to know who says the Gemara. Hashtam. Let's begin. The Mishnah gave an example that not only can you can water a beis hashalchen even from a mayon sheyotza batchila. And again, a newly emerged spring source is a spring where there is a chance that the walls that direct the water, because they're new, won't hold. If it will collapse, the fixing of it is usher. The person who's involved will forget and he might end up doing work. So the Mishnah's chiddush is we're not concerned for that. If it collapses, you'll know not to fix it. But as long as it's not collapsed, there's no problem working with it. Then the Mishnah went on to say, and you can also use a mayon that's old. Like we asked, why is that needed? Even though you might have said the asili in puli, that it might collapse, and you might end up doing work which you may not do. Yet, what did the Mishnah paskin? Mashkin, that you are, as long as the walls did not collapse, you are allowed to use even a newly emerged spring source of water. So mayon shelo yotza batchila, if it's not a fresh spring, it's a spring, the lo yasili in pule. Chances for this collapsing is much less. Miboye. Does the Mishnah even need to write it? Why did the Mishnah have to say that? Answers the Gemara Amri. So they explained, they answered in the yeshiva, the Chevra said like this, Itzrach, yes, it's needed, because Tana, if the Mishnah only would have written that you can use a mayan sheyotza batchila, you can use a water that just emerged, I would have thought that hachi hu de beis hashalchen in beis habal loy. See, there is a din that the Mishnah is teaching only by implication. The fact that the Mishnah said that mashkin, that you can irrigate, that you can water a beis hashalchen, the Mishnah is really implying a beis habal, You may not, because any field that can live off just rainwater, again, adding human irrigation will make it grow even more or even quicker. That's not a heter. Because not having that is not, you're not losing anything. You were preventing more profit. So the Mishnah is implying that a Beis Habal may not be watered. But maybe, if the Mishnah wouldn't have repeated the line that you can use a mayin shelo yatsa, you would have thought that, when do we differentiate between a Beis HaShalchan and a Beis Habal? Only when it's a spring that might, there's another problem. The spring might collapse. You might end up doing tircha yesera. Only there did we say a Beis Habal not. Mishum da'asil in puli, because for that, not you need it. It's only to get more profit. So then we say it's not worth the risk. One might have thought that if you have a source of water that's already older, and here older, like you and me, the older the better. Here a mine that's old is good, because the liyosilin pool, we're not worried that it's going to collapse. So one might have thought afilu beis habal nami, that even if you are irrigating a beis habal type of field, and what would justify that? You would think that even to prevent losing profit is also called a davar ha'aved, and you will be allowed. So Kamash Malan, that's the word, that loishna mayin sheyatza batchila, and loishna mayin sheyatza batchila, even if there's no problem. Nevertheless, only a beis habal can be watered, because the definition of a davar ha'aved is if you will lose principle. Loss of principle is called davar ha'aved. Forgoing profit is not called davar ha'aved according to our Mishnah. Beis habal loim. Now a little bit of semantics. Umay mashma the high beis hashalchan lishna dit sachusohi. Shalchan, like, why are we calling a field that needs to be irrigated by us? Not the natural irrigation is not enough. The word sachusa means it's thirsty. It's a thirsty field. The rain that Hashem is giving is not enough. Why is it called beis hashalchan? Where do we find in Scripture the word shalchan in reference to something that's thirsty? Because it says in the bottom, va'ata oyev v'yogeya, you'll be faint. Chevra, faint means faint from thirst. And v'yogeh, you'll be exhausted. And the Targum Taka says, va'at, how do you say in Aramish, a faint from thirst? Mash lehi. Mash lehi, right, shalching, have the shin and the lamid. And again, the hey and the ches, we mention it, especially if you're from Russia, it's obvious the hey becomes a ches by default. Hello. So mashali is the source of shalchen. And it means thirsty. Velohi means exhausted. Okay, and now Omai Mashma, the high Beis Habal, Lishna de Miyat Vusahi. Beis Habal, again, it means a field that can grow, can produce only by the rainwater, which means really, Baal here means it's a settled field. Settled, you're good. Now, of course, if you add human irrigation, like we mentioned, it's going to grow more, it's going to grow quicker. But if not, you're not going to lose anything. All right? So how do you know that the word Baal can be used in the context of something that's settled? Because it says a pasuk in Yeshaya that just like ki yival bachur psula, just like a young bachur, right, gets married to a young woman, and the Targum it translates in Aramish, are kama di mitoisav. The word mitoisav means settled. Uleim im psulta. Just like a young chassan feels settled with his kala, so the pasuk writes a beautiful expression that yatvun bigaveich banayich, that your children will settle in you, in reference to God Almighty. But here you see the words Baal. All right, so Baal, sometimes in a very exact way means be'ilah, the act of relation, but it means that they're settled. You're settled. Interesting, in Baal also means a husband. Marriage settles a person in a good way. Bestabal, abal abos. Okay, very good. Now, this concept that the heter of davar ha'aved, which everyone agrees is one of the 5 heterim, there's going to be a loss. Then you can work on chalamoyed. It's only if you will suffer a loss of principle and not you're going to forgo profit, which is the opinion of our Mishnah, as we extrapolated from the extra mimayin shaliyotza batchila. That's a machlokes tanoim. Not everyone agrees to that. So, and number one. Number two, okay, so it says the Gemara, Man Tano, who is the author that holds, number one, the din, that pseida in harvachaloi, davar ha'avid is only if it's going to prevent an actual loss. you already have something sprouting, and it will die if you don't water it. But making it a beis habal, if you water a beis habal, you're going to have more produce, it's going to grow quicker. That's not called a loss. And number two, what was the number two? That even when you do have a heter of davar ha'aved, when your mamash losing principle, the Mishnah gave examples that if there's tircha yesera takes away the heter of davar ha'aved. Right? Number two, vafilu b'makim pseida, even if there is mamash a loss, but mitrach nami loy tarchinan, tircha yesera will not be permitted. Who has that opinion? Not everyone. So let's attempt number one. Our Mishnah is authored by, or it's an anonymous Mishnah quoting the Shita of the great Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, which would be amazing, because you should just know our rule. Whenever Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov opines, especially in a Mishnah, we always follow with him halachically. It's called, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is called the Kav V'Naki. Kav means it's only a little, but it's clean. Some quality is good. And Kav Kuvav in Mishnayis, through the whole Mishnayis, the Shita, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Oimer is quoted 106 times. Kav V'Naki. So even though his name is not quoted, but it's great if this would be Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. And why would we link it to him? Because we will learn soon in Moed Katan Davav. The Mishnah says, yes?
This does not count as one of the 106, right?
This will not be counted to the one. Yaakov, number one, the Gemara is going to prove it's not him. But even if it would have been him, his name is not mentioned. One may direct or divert water that is gathered under one tree. You want to direct it for it to go to another tree. Again, we're speaking about the work on Chol HaMoed. The Mishnah says you are allowed to do that. Because when, I can direct water to another tree, because if a tree, the fruit that's in development will get ruined if it doesn't get the water when it needs the water. But throughout the field, there, if it has water, even the better. But you're not going to lose anything. So you see that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov differentiates that davar ha'aved only means that I'm allowed to do work to prevent loss, but I can't do work because if I won't work, I'm going to lose profit. Principle, yeah. Profit, no. Indeed, guys, this is the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. But nowhere do we find that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov said that if there is a tircha yesera, then you may not even do that. That we get. But tircha b'makim pseida mishamat lei. So the second din of our Mishnah, we don't know from any other place that is the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Elo Amar Rav Papa, second white line. No, our Mishnah is following the opinion of the Tana Rebbe Yehudi, the Tanyon. So now we're going to a Tosefta. Mayina yoytze batchila, right? A spring that is just now emerging from the ground. Mashkin mimenu, afilu stay beis habal. Not like our Mishnah. Divrei Rabbi Meir holds that David ha'aved, which is the heter for working on Chol HaMoed, doesn't only mean if I'm not going to work, I'm going to suffer a loss of principle. Rav Meir holds that if a person is going to suffer a loss of potential profit, he also may work on Chol HaMoed. However, Rabbi Yehuda argues, and he says, like our Mishnah, Ein mashkin elos lei beis hashalchin. Shecharva, that dried up, we'll see soon what that means. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer, loikach v'loikach. I don't agree, not with Rabbi Yehuda, not with Rabbi Meir. We'll see soon again what he holds. Now, the Tosefta continues. The Gemara is going to go back and clarify every line in this Tosefta, in this Braisa. Yasser al kein Omer Rabbi Yehuda, lo yefana odam amas hamayim. A person may not clean out an irrigation canal in order in order to water to that which is growing in his garden. Or when people had a house that is now laying in ruin, people would make use of the real estate and they would plant things there. Obviously, this is a location that cannot live off rainwater. It needs human irrigation. And chevre, 1 second. Here, if things were already planted, and Rabbi Yehuda is saying that you may not take these steps. If you're not going to take these steps, you know what's going to happen? That which is there will get ruined. Will rot. will get dried up. Why can't you do that? Because it's tircha yesera. Clear. Rabbi Yehuda holds that even if it's a davar ha'aved, mamish, you're losing. If it's tircha yesera, you can't do work. That's Rameir. Okay, so end of quote. Now we want to go into nuance. When the Braisa began, and we were quoting the first, when Rabbi Yehuda began, that ein mashkin elos de beis hashalchen shecharva. Charva means it got dried up. Ilema charva mamish. Hold on, if it mamish got dried up, then what's the point of watering it? There's nothing there. It's dead already. It's dead. Shalom. Right? Lomali the mashkele. No. Amar Abaye means that shecharva memayin zeh v'yotza lo memayin acher. That's what happened over here. That it had a source of water, but that source of water dried up. Now you have a new mayon. That's mamish the case of the Mishnah. And again, you would think that maybe you may not use a new mayon, because if the new mayon's walls will collapse, you're going to end up doing. We're not worried about that. If the walls collapse, you may not fix it, but as long as it's working, chaparain and use the water. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, "Loy kach v'loy kach" means loishna charev mayana. That's what he meant to say. It doesn't make a difference whether the original source of water that you were using to irrigate that location dried up. Loishna, loy charav mayan, or even if the original one, in either case, in both cases, mayan sheyotza batchila loy. Interestingly, the issue that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah has is exactly this, is that even when you have the heter of tircha yisei, of davar ha'avid, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah agrees that tircha yesera will make it prohibited. But he's a little bit more machmer than Rabbi Yehuda. He's more machmer than our Mishnah. He holds that if your water source is coming from a location where there's a high possibility that you're going to end up doing tircha yesera, then don't even go there. Don't even go there. Okay. Now, Umimai asks the Gemara, let's go back to proof that we're right. That what? That our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, but maybe you didn't understand Rabbi Yehuda in the Brisa correctly. Second to last line. Maybe at kan loy ka'amar Rabbi Yehuda beis hashalchan in beis habal loy. Again, where did Rabbi Yehuda say you can only irrigate a beis hashalchan because there you're going to actually lose money? A beis habal may not be irrigated because you're only going to lose profit, but you're not losing principle. Maybe that differentiation was only because the Braisa is speaking about a mayan sheyotze batchila. So we have this additional chashash that maybe the walls of the spring will collapse and you will end up having tircha yesera, taf beis amid beis, like we said, dilma asili in pulei, but maybe mayan sheyotze batchila. Maybe if your water source is already something that it was paved out already, not collapsing, no worry about tircha yesera, dilma asili in pulei, maybe the Tosefta, Rabbi Yehuda will hold afilu beis habal nami, even though it's the issue is not about losing principle, it's only about I don't want to lose a potential profit. Maybe that also will justify. So you know what says the Gemara? You can learn pshat like that in the Tosefta, but if you were to do that, then our Mishnah would have no author. So now the Gemara is teaching us how to learn Braisas. That when you have a Mishnah, Rabbeinu HaKadosh decided not to give a name in our Mishnah. He made this into a anonymous Mishnah. He is also relying on us learning the Braisas, the Toseftas, and he wanted us to find this Rabbi Yehuda. And yes, we're going to learn Pshat and the Tosefta, the way we're learning it, to know who authored our Mishnah. Im kein masnisin aman tirmiyam. Who will you attribute the Mishnah to? It can only go according from all of the works of the Braisas and the Toseftas. The only source we have, which sounds like perhaps is the author of our Mishnah, is this Tosefta. So now we know the Pshat and the Tosefta. Elal Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda indeed, loishna mayin sheyotze batchila, loishna mayin shelo yotze batchila. Doesn't make a difference. Beis hashalchan in, beis habal loy, because the prevention of profit doesn't justify working on Chol HaMoed, and watering a field is considered working on Chol HaMoed. And the reason why the Tosefta spoke about a case of you using a newly emerged spring source to tell you and to underline the opinion of Rabbi Meir that holds that not only can you use it, Rav Meir says that you can even be mashka stay abal. Why is that? Because prevention of profit is also called a loss. Okay, Nukodim. Chaver, we're going to go now, me'ingen le'ingen, we're going to learn some dinim in Hilchas Shabbos, and we're going to see how that relates to our Mishnah. The Itmar, right? Itmar is a opening of works of Amoyroim. It was stated by Amoyroim. Hamenakesh is weeding a field. Weeding, like this, guys, when I pull out something from the ground on Shabbos because I want it, that falls under, who knows, which av? Koitzer. Harvesting. Weeding, when people weed a field, they don't want that which they're taking out. They're not doing it lagufa. They're taking out these weeds in order for that which stays in the ground, for that to grow better. Now, what av does this fall under? That's the topic over here. Weeding. And v'hamashke mayim lazroyim b'Shabbos. Here you can see already the link to our topic. Watering a field that has seeds planted in it on Shabbos. What would you think? We know it's prohibited biblically, but there's a machlekes under which of. Now, the way the Gemara words it, like who cares under which of? I'll tell you why. Because there is a rule that for someone to be punished in a Beis Din, prior to, in Shabbos, God forbid, the punishment is capital. They're going to be stoned to death. Prior to their violation, and right prior, Toich Kedei Dibur, they needed to be forewarned by one of the Eidim. And not only you can't do what you're doing, they have to tell them you can't weed, because weeding falls under that av. They have to specify exactly what the prohibition is. According to some Rishonim, they have to noch add the verse in the Torah, and it says, don't do work, right? Lo yisasem melacha. Other people say they don't have to quote the verse, but you have to tell the person exactly what violation he's about to do. And the punishment. And you're going to get skila for that. So, mishum mai masrin on bei, on account of which av are we going to forewarn him? Machlokes Rabbah and Rabbi Yosef. Rabbah says that weeding and watering, again, watering is the opening topic of Moed Katan, falls under the malacha of chodesh. Interesting. Chodesh is the preliminary step that you do prior to seeding the ground. You're plowing, you're softening the ground, you're making the ground readied to receive the seed. Rabbi Yosef says, no. Both weeding and watering, you are enhancing that which is already planted. Mishum zoireya. Interesting machlokes. Now, Omar Rabba, kavasi dedi mistabra. No, I'm right. Why? Because ma darkei shel chodesh. What's the neshama? What are you really doing by chodesh? Is lirapoyei ara, you are softening the earth. Hainami, both weeding and or watering a planted field. Merapoyei ara, you are also softening by weeding. You're loosening the oil. Versteht? Water, you make it soft. So that's chodesh. Even though chodesh chavra you do prior to planting. Here, that which you left in the ground is already seeded. Doesn't matter. It's more about making the earth a greater keli. Now, oir and the keli. Let's say zereya is the oir, and the land is the keli. So are you enhancing the keli, or are you adding to the light? Amar Rabbi Yosef, kavasi didim estabra. Ma darkei shel zoreya. What does zoreya do? What's the soul of seeding, of planting? It's litzamuchei peda. You're promoting growth. Hainami mitzamach peda. You're promoting growth. Okay. Now, when the Gemara said, Ariel, that why are they arguing? Who cares? Because when you give someone warning, you have to know which av. Don't water because it's a tulda of chodesh or tulda de zoreya. The whole topic is based on the premise that you can't have a tulda that's a tulda of two avos. Can't have two different dads. There's only one dad. Right? So, why not? Why don't we say each one has a point? Why don't we consider weeding / watering a tulda both of Chodesh and of Zoreya, and whichever Av you mentioned in your Hasra, you hit the nail on the top. You hit the head of the nail. Like, who told you there can't be a tulda that doesn't have two avos? This is Azaruach HaKodesh when they yes.
Why does eating and watering have to be the same?
Oh, they are the same. Okay, Danny, we're learning Legirsa. It's the given. It's definitely the same. Only question is connected to this, connected to that. So Amar le Abaya. Now Abaya is the Talmud of both, as we know, primarily of Rabbah. So Abaya tells his stepfather. It's ironic, because Abaya also had his father passed away, right? Abaya Asher b'cha Yerucham Yasim, and he was raised by Rabbah. So he tells him, listen, L'didach kasha and L'Rabbi Yosef kasha. In other words, why can't it be both? L'didach kasha what? Mishum chodesh in, mishum zerei aloi. Why not both? It's a gavah. How good is that? No, he had two fathers. L'Rabbi Yosef kasha mishum zerei mishum chodesh loi. And if Abai is saying himself, you can't, a tulda, right? You can only be liable for one av. It's not true. Amar Rav Kana is giving you a great example. Someone who's pruning. We're speaking about pruning vines. Now, the act of pruning is for what? The act of pruning, it's mamish like weeding, right? When you prune, normally, you're not pruning because you want those little pieces of wood that you are removing. When you prune, you make that which you leave a lot stronger. That's zoireya. You're promoting growth. But what happens if someone prunes and they need those little pieces of vine or wood for fuel? That's something else, right? So then you're chayev, you're koitzer. You're planting. Noiteya, zoirei, just to know, zuriya is for seeds. Noiteya is trees. It's the same as we learned in Shabbos. So the Rav Kahana says, you're chayiv shtayim, you're chayiv two. One act, you're chayiv two. Achas mishum noiteya, va'achas mishum koitzer. And indeed, the Gemara says kasha. But the bottom line is that Rabbah and Rabbi Yosef, who agrees that there could be some act that is a tulda and connected to two different avos, but not over here. Either chodesh or zoireya. Now, again, we're going to see why is this brought over here. We'll see soon, not yet. Eitzvei, Rabbi Yosef, L'Rabba, it says in a Braisa, Hamenakesh, someone who is weeding, or v'hamachapel lekalayim, someone who covers the seeds with earth, which is what you do to promote growth. This Braisa is not about Shabbos and Yontif. This is about kalayim. So you're going to chayiv malchus. Rabbi Akiva says that af hamakayim, even if you don't do an act of weeding, even if you don't do an act of covering over the earth, simply maintaining that which you have, you maintained it, you're chayiv malchus. Whoa, chevra, isn't there a rule that lav she'ein boi maisa, if I'm violating a lav, but I'm not doing it by doing an action, I don't get malchus? Yeah? So many Rishonim say that Rabbi Akiva is speaking about someone who builds a fence around it. In other words, he did an action, but he didn't do an action directly to the kalayim. He did another action, which is in order to maintain that which is, Rabbi Akiva says, even there, Yechayev Malchus. Now, end of quote. So it comes along now, Rabbi Yosef, and he tells Rabba, Bishlem Elididi, which I say that the first case, Menakesh, by Shabbos, is problematic because of Zoireya. It fits. It says in Parshas Kedoshim, Sotcha Loi Sizra Kalayim. So if it's planting, if weeding is planting, that's why Yechayev Malchus. Which lav? Sotcha Loi Sizra Kalayim. El. But you, Rabbi, who holds that weeding on Shabbos is only connected to Chodesh, Chodesh b'kalayim mi'asira. You're only plowing. Doesn't say in the Torah, when you're plowing, there's nothing planted yet. So answer is Rabbi. You know why? Because since by weeding it's already planted, the act of Chodesh or weeding is being mekayim gavaldik. It's maintaining that which is taka Chodesh. Amalei mishum mekayim. And you see that in this Braisa that Mekayim is also a reason for you to get Malkus when you do an action. But hold on, isn't Mekayim only the sheet of Rabbi Akiva? Rabbi Akiva oimer af ha-Mekayim. Does that not imply that the Tanakama doesn't subscribe for you getting Malkus if you were only Mekayim, if you were only maintaining that which is? So therefore we must say, as we say sometimes, that we have to amend this Braisa, and all of it is the sheet of Rabbi Akiva hi umay tam ka'amar. And this is the way we're going to reread the Braisa. This is all the way Rabbah learns Pshat, not because Menakesh is Zoireya, no, because it's takanat Zoireya, it's Chodesh. But it's an act of plowing when the Kalayim is already planted. So it's really maintaining that which is Mekayim. Who says you're Chayiv Malkus for Mekayim? Should Rabbi Akiva oimer af ha-Mekayim. Okay, very nice, but I got a problem. Again, for you to get Malkus, you have to be violating a negative commandment. Planting, the Torah says, Sotcha loy sizra kilayim. That's a verse. Where does it say in the Torah not to be Mekayim? My Tama de Rabbi Akiva, where do you find the love? Answers the Gemara the Tanya. When it says, Sotcha loy sizra kilayim, this verse in Parshas Kedoshim, indeed, ein li elo for which you are violating and you're going to get Malkus. Mekayim in ayin, Talmud loimer, kilayim sot choloi. So what you need to do is you need to open up a Chumash. This is such a beautiful Hasidic drasha. That same verse doesn't begin sot choloi sizra kilayim. Shuki, remember the pasuk? The pasuk says, behemtecha loy tarbiya kilayim, kama sot choloi sizra kilayim. Take away the kama. Read the pasuk not the way the pshat is. Just read, you will see that you have the words kalayim, which is really in reference to don't crossbreed. In result, you have all these viruses that are crossbreeds. As we learned in Megillah, God has to figure out the midah keneged midah. Kalayim, read it, kalayim sot choloi. Amazing. Kalayim sot choloi means don't even maintain kalayim in your field. Beautiful. Okay. Now, why are we speaking about weeding, my friends, in Masechtas Moed Katan? Now you'll get it. Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah. Mashkin beis hashalchan b'moyed, u'ba'ashvi is. You are allowed to irrigate. Again, there's going to be a real loss. There is no tircha yisera, but it's a davar ha'aved. Heter number one. You're going to lose that which is already yours. You're going to lose principle. You can work on Yamt, on Cholamoid. You can work on Cholamoid and on Shemitah. So now, says the Gemara, Bishleim HaMoyed, the problem, right, Mishum Tirchahu, problem is, you're working. Baru b'makim Pseida, Sharu Rabbanan. Parenthetically, when we spoke out Bekitzit in the intro that there's really a four-way approach from the Rishonim, are the prohibitions of work on Cholamoid biblical or only rabbinical? If you learn that it's taka biblical, if it's asr midoiraisa, you're not going to find that because of a money loss, the Chachamim will allow you to do something which otherwise you are permitted. So throughout this Masechta, we're going to always find one-liners that will be the base of one of the various opinions. This fits a lot better if the prohibition to begin with is only rabbinical. That's normally where, if the Rabbanan were the ones that made an Isur, they lachatchila didn't say it if it's going to cause you a money loss. Anyways, the Chachamim allowed it. Elo Shvi is, let's understand, why would you be allowed to water on Shemitah? Right, that's what everyone wondered. Hold on, don't we know we can't work the land on Shemitah? Now, Bein Laman da Amar, Mishum Zereya. Bein Laman da Amar, Mishum Chodesh. And by the way, this question isn't against Rabbah or only Rabbi Yosef, it's against both. Watering, that's what they're discussing, weeding and watering, right? So let's go watering if you're going to hold that the problem of watering on Shabbos is because it's considered a derivative, a tulda of Zoireya. The Torah says, befedish, that you may not sotcha loy sizra. Guys, that's a verse on Parshas Bahar. You can't seed a field on the Shemitah. So, Zriya is a problem, and Charisha is a problem. Now hold on, where does it say in the Torah, who knows, that you can't plow a field on the Shemitah year? So for that, really it's subject to a machlokes Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael. We have it so often, this keeps on coming up. We're going to learn now a limud of Rabbi Akiva. In Parshas Mishpatim, there's a pasuk that begins for sure to speak about the prohibitions of Shabbos, but the examples the Torah gives is becharish ubekatzer tishbois, rest from plowing, right? Rest from harvesting. And if the sefer of the pasuk would only be referring to Shabbos, but on Shabbos you only have to rest from Chodesh and Katzer, that's the kasha. On Shabbos you have to rest from all of the Lametes Malachas. So Rabbi Akiva is the one that says the famous Einoi Ingen l'Shabbos, Teneo Ingen l'Shmita. According to Rabbi Akiva, there's a verse in Parshas Mishpatim which says Bechodesh ubekatzer tishbois, which means rest from plowing, rest from harvesting. Rabbi Akiva learns that verse is speaking about the whole Shemitah year. An explicit verse that does not allow us to plow on the Shemitah. We got a problem now. So now watering, Bein L'Rabba, Bein L'Rabbi Yosef, it comes to Shabbos, it's a biblical violation. Either Chodesh or Zoreya. So good, so now I got, not good, bad, I got a problem. So how can our Mishnah allow a Yid to water a Beis HaShalchin on the Shemitah year? Either I'm Zoreya or I'm Chodesh. Moededik. And guys, we're going to see how far we can get, but just to know that the beautiful Hashgacha Pratis, Daf Gimel will all be about Shemitah. But let's begin. So Abaye and Rava. Answer number one, Omar Abaye, Bashviz Bisman Hazeh. Let's go back to the same concept. Generally, this is the principle. Whenever God says, thou shalt not, just because I'm going to have a financial loss is not a reason why I will. God forbid. God said, don't do it. Right, there's a whole question, how much money do I have to spend in keeping a positive commandment? But not to violate a negative commandment, I got to lose all the money in the world. I can't do it. Whenever there is a prohibition that's only of a rabbinic level, it's a lot more common that the Chachamim themselves says, you can't do it, but if you're going to lose money, I'll let you do it. So the Abaye says, I'll tell you, our Mishnah is premised on the Shita of Rebbe, who holds that Shemitah nowadays is only rabbinic. And it fits, just like Cholamoid you can't work, but you Davar Ha'aved, you're going to lose real profit, you're going to lose real principle, you can work. Same thing on Shemitah. You have a Beis HaShalchin, you already have stuff planted, you already watered it once, or it rained once, things are beginning to grow, it has some value. If you won't water it, the little value will be lost. That's when you're allowed to do it. Where do we see the sheet of Rebbe that Shemitah nowadays is only a rabbinic? Let's read it inside. V'Rebbehi, the Tanya. Rebbe Yomer, based on a pasuk in Parshas Re'eh, where the pasuk says, "V'zeh dvar Shemitah shamoit." The word Shemitah means to relinquish. Now there are many relinquishments that happen on the Shemitah year. Number one is that if you loaned me money, then there's a certain relinquishment if you didn't make the principal, you can't come and collect it. There is the relinquishment of leaving the land, not working the land. You have also the dinim of yovel, which actually relinquish the properties themselves, and they really revert back to their original owners. So Rebbe is saying that since the Torah juxtaposes the words v'zeh dvar hashmita, really there is a comma, shamoit. It says shamoit kol bal masa yodoi. So he learns a limud b'shtei shmitas hakosav medaber. We juxtapose and we learn that we always put together on the same track the laws of shmitas karka. Shmitas karka are dinim that are connected to not working the land on Shemitah, including what we spoke about, not planting, not plowing. It also is in reference to not working the land on Yovel, on the 50th year. And va'acha shmitas ksafim, the second Shemitah is about the relinquishment of money loans. Rebbe tells us, bisman sha'ata meshamet karka, when Shemitah and Yovel are biblically in effect, then ata meshamet ksafim. Then do you also biblically have to relinquish loans? Bisman she'i ata meshamet karka, that's the key line. You see that there's a concept that on a biblical level, there isn't always the rules of Shemitah and of Yovel, i'ata meshamet ksafim. Now we're not going to focus on Shemitah's ksafim, but just to know how it works, that really the key will be, is there Yovel? Now for Yovel to be in effect, these are the words you have to have, kol yoishve'a aleha. Literally, that means you have to have all of the Jewish people living in the land of Israel, and it's very difficult to take that literally. Because if you have one Jew traveling, What then? There's no yovel. So that sugya is really in Gittin and in other places. Daf Lamed Vav. Let's go with the approach that you need to have members of all of the tribes in Israel. There are times that you don't have members of all of the tribes in the land of Israel. That really happened from the times of the Churban, right? Churban Bayis Rishon. From, even though we keep on learning, there was the exile of the 10 tribes. They were returned under the leadership of Yoshiyahu. Theoretically, the rules of Yovel were back in place, but when the first temple was destroyed, until the coming of Mashiach, there's no Yovel. No Yovel means that there's no Shemitah according to Rebbe. That's the key. But one second, don't we keep Shemitah? Of course we keep Shemitah. We keep Shemitah rabbinically. Since Shemitah is only kept on a rabbinic level, that's why when there's hefsed or bedavar ha'aved, mamish like chalamayid, you are allowed to water. It fits perfectly. And we're going to stop. I just want to add one thing, that now this is a year of Shemitah, and first of all, to be inspired. Nowadays, Tafshan Pei Beis, of the many Yiddish farmers in Israel that are leaving their fields fallow. God bless them. It's amazing. That's the Pashat Mitzvah. There are many farmers that do what we call the Heter Mechira, that they sell their field to a non-Jew, which is 100% a good heter, but you should know that the premise of that heter is only because Shemitah is only midrabanan. Whenever Shemitah will revert back to a biblical obligation, and this is happening now, if it didn't happen already in our lifetimes, when there are more and more Yidden living in Eretz Yisrael, all right, this is part of the coming of Mashiach, then even those who up until now were using the Heter Mechina will stop using it, because Shemitah, Midoiraisa, we're not going to have any Yaterim. Anyway, that's approach number one, and God willing, tomorrow we'll begin with Shitas Rava to be continued.